Greetings, folks. This is a sample of the second episode of the first season of Kappatoo. Although it's only 7 episodes, so it's not much of a season. So from a number of episodes point of view, so some samples
That's more
there.
than some shows have had in seasons. So.
Yes, some other shows have been a bit shorter. Yeah. One moment. So let me get things a bit more organized. So I'm going to read through the Wikipedia summary of the episode, because sometimes they sort of like add little suppositions that help with the flow of the plot. Kappatoo, maybe because it was based on a children's book, and there might have been some extra stuff in the book. Kappatoo is still struggling to get used to the 20th century. After blowing up the vacuum cleaner, thinking it is a hostile life form. Now, I think there was a nice little setup to that, in that there was a little bit of dialogue between Simon in the future and the computer, talking about the android rebellion. So I thought that was a nice little setup to make it plausible. It was like, oh no, I'm being attacked by machines. Thinking it was a hostile life form being caught. Yes, Jeff?
You're saying that the him asking the computer to quiz him about that was setting up the vacuum cleaner scene?
Yeah, I think because there is a connection there, in that Simon thought that he was being attacked by. I mean, he thought when he saw this vacuum cleaner head coming around the door, he thought he was being attacked by it. So I think maybe it was to add a little bit of plausibility that he would be afraid of it. Maybe he'd been taught in the past about robots rebelling. I mean, it would sort of explain why he put that in earlier in the story.
Yeah, I didn't make that particular connection. I just, I assumed it with the vacuum cleaner again. It was just something he didn't recognize, so he assumed it could be some sort of a enemy of some sort.
Yeah, well, I just think it's a plausible.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying I didn't think of it that way, but so I didn't immediately understand when you were making that connection.
Yeah, well, every now and then I'll make a connection that's plausible, because we intuitives make a lot of connections that are not as plausible. So yeah, he thinks it's a hostile life form, being caught stealing £47 worth of pet food from the local supermarket after not knowing how shopping works in this time zone. Luckily, he has his wristband to help him by freezing and rewinding time so he can correct the damage. But after freezing time to escape the police officer at the supermarket and find Simon's sister and her friend Sharon having broken into the school on a Saturday. That's not quite true, because the school was open because they were having a fair. So they didn't quite break into it. That gives the impression that they, forced entry. It runs out of fuel, leaving him unable to control time. Yes, I think there was a slight mention from Andrew O'Connor playing the computer when he was like.
Yeah, I didn't get that part, but maybe it just went by too fast for me.
Yeah. He said. I think he said something about fuel.
I didn't know why he didn't use the time thing again, but it did occur to me. Like what the other effects of freezing time are, because there's other sci-fi things that have sort of explored that concept of like how it you can do something like that and it doesn't just go on like nothing happened, like it has detrimental effects in some way. So I kind of wondered while it was doing that, but they obviously were just playing it up, giving him some limitation, like we were talking about last week about if you have something where you can just use for anything, then it starts to lose its appeal, because it just becomes a get out of jail free card with anything. So
so Jeff, I'll say that I'm keeping a policy of like no spoilers, so
Good.
Sometimes they have answers for things, and I choose not to give them because I know you don't like spoilers.
And I like it coming out like a piece at a time. You know, if they tried to cram all that into the first episode about how that worked, then it would have been too much. So kind of having it play out this is better to show an example of when this happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's a key skill in writing, and I agree with Robert McKee on that. Is how you parcel out the exposition, and it's one of the things that you would have noticed when they talked about Doctor Who, how you handle the exposition in that first episode, where it's about creating a mystery and setting things up. Simon is still enjoying himself until Sigmasix keeps bragging about how he's going to defeat Kappatoo, not knowing it is really Simon on the Hypergrid Kappatoo's computer. Kappatoo's computer? Oh, wait a minute. That sentence is a little bit weird. Okay, here we go. To defeat Kappatoo. Not knowing it is really Cypher on the Hypergrid Kappatoo's computer. Yeah, that who now has a human form explains the Hypergrid to him, and he decides it would be best to let the computer teach him all about it and what tactics. I would have rewritten that. That's a little bit difficult to read. Right. Something on. You know what I mean? You've got a couple of sentences like wound together there, and it's difficult to like read it out and make sense of it at the same time. Right. Simon Nash, interesting. Like this is the most recent picture I have of him. Yeah, he still looks a little bit older, but born in 1972. So you can see here that it was probably about. I mean, it came out in 1990. They might have made it in 1989 because it doesn't look. I think it was broadcast early in the new year in 1990, and they're outside, and it doesn't look that cold. So it's probably made in 1989. And so it'd probably been about 17 when he did it. But the thing is about him being 17. Before I get through these screen grabs properly, is there's a screen grab I wanted to show before we get properly started, and this is just something. It's quite silly me spending all this time on this, but he's 17 years old and he's going bald. I mean, I didn't go bald that early. I mean, receding hairline at 17. Right.
I mean, that could just be something they did for the show. I don't know, because in the scenes, the other scenes, he looks like his hair looks fuller. So
yeah, but
either way,
yeah, he might just. I mean, some people do. I mean, I started to go bald at like 24, but I mean, he's got a bit of a receding hairline. Anyway, so. I'm going to get going in terms of putting it on auto play. So, as I went through this episode, I noticed you made some sounds of amusement a couple of times, Jeff. I think it was the lawnmower and the cat food tickled you.
I'm not sure what the first thing you said was, but yeah, the cat
the lawnmower. When he went on the lawnmower ride, and he's sort of like, and he's driving it in a sort of proud ENTP-ish way. He's sort of cocky on the lawnmower.
I don't see the ENTP-ish part, but yeah, the lawnmower thing did amuse me in a couple of different ways. Especially, I think I laughed the most when he was leaving the store. The way he started it up, like it's just okay, time to go home. Start up my lawnmower.
Yes. Yeah, the nonchalant way of doing it, and because you do see these like ENTP eccentrics, and I sort of written here, an ENTP would ride a lawnmower as transport, but in a bowler hat for extra eccentric points. I once saw like an ENTP-ish sort of character in a supermarket. Oh yeah, and then I should have mentioned in the first week just about where the Kappatoo comes from in the like Kappa 270 something, because it's like you've got Delta 4 and Sigma 6, that sort of thing. And then when they did the thing about Lustro and Lustret, I looked that up. That you've got lustro is a word in Esperanto and Latin and Spanish, and I think it's in Italian as well. And lustret is Latin. I've gone through most of my notes. So Jeff, what did you think of it?
I liked it. It wasn't quite as good as the first episode, but I think that's kind of. I think it can go in one of two ways when you have like the first thing. I don't know how to say this right, but the second episode can either sort of make it stronger, or it can be sort of a little bit of a letdown after like a strong first episode. So this was that, but slightly, not like a lot. It just wasn't quite as I don't know. I'm not coming up with the right words right now, but it didn't have quite as many moments to me as the first one that I was like that I thought were quite as fun. I maybe got slightly bogged down, but it still was really good pace to it, because it felt like when it ended, like it had gone by quickly. And I like they developed a little bit more of the sister, because she was barely in the first one, and in this one kind of fleshes out her character slightly, at least that she's kind of up to some mischief.
Yeah.
Not just which is still sort of based on trying to mess with her brother, but that's fine. That's still like a more than what we saw in the first one.
Yeah.
But what was I going to say? Yeah, well, I already said the thing about it occurred to me about the effects of stopping time. But I liked how he has sort of a again, I wouldn't put it on any particular type, because he could still be like an artisan type or whatever, because he has this sort of optimism that he's going to figure something out. So he kind of he jumps into the situation. I would say it's pretty. The one thing I could say we would agree on is he's not a J.
Yeah.
Because he's willing to just sort of leap into whatever and figure it out. And he's this sort of optimistic. You said cocky, maybe a little cocky, but it's just sort of this. I'll figure it out as I go along, and then he reacts to things as they happen. But so that's kind of amusing in the sense that he has, in a lot of situations has no clue what he's doing, but he just tries to go ahead and do it anyway. Yeah. And he sort of relies on the technology to bail him out, but, he doesn't entirely do that. So that was interesting too, is that it wasn't just a constant thing where he was using that for everything. He tried to figure stuff out, but it was just like, well, when I just get in too deep a hole, then I'll use this to bail myself out. So it'll be interesting to see in the next episode if they do further develop that, where when he realizes, when he's out of fuel, or he has things that prevent him from being able to kind of use that as much of a fail-safe, whether he uses other tactics to try to figure it out. But I also said last week that whether or not I would enjoy switching places, if somebody came from the future, would depend on whether I thought, which girl I liked better. So far, I like the future girl better. So I think I would probably be in agreement with Simon, where I would probably want to stay in the future from what I've seen so far. But I don't know. I didn't mention the computer human guy thing. Yeah. That was the first time I kind of cringed at something in this show. I was like, that came on a little strong, where that was kind of stupid. That was my initial impression. But he calmed down a little bit after the initial thing and was a little bit more reasonable. But the first thing, I was like, oh no, this is going to be like, this is going to be a dumb thing. And it started dumb, but then it wasn't too bad after that. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was thinking, always, Jeff's either going to love this or hate this. But
I hated it for about 20 seconds. Yeah. And then after that initial 20 seconds was up, then it was like, okay, it's all right. Because I'm not going to hold a grudge, against him. It's just if it kept up with him being like this over the top presentation, then I wouldn't have been able to stand too much of that. But,
right.
but yeah,
I liked that he did I like the impression of Adam West that he did of the '60s Batman.
is that what he was supposed to be?
Yeah, he says Robin. He says something like I don't know Robin. That kind of.
I didn't that part.
It was quite spooky when I watched it in February. So this is why I'm quiet on a certain plot points, folks, because I've recently watched it all and I don't want to spoil it for Jeff. That I was thinking when he did all the references, when he did a lot of these voices, I got most of them. And he's doing some of the voices in later episodes are for like things for British pop culture that were never shown in the United States. So it's like you're not going to get when he does an impression of Mavis in Coronation Street.
Well, and part of it is fun too because is Kappatoo is trying to figure things out in 1990 Britain or whatever. There's some things where I have to do that too. So in a sense, the audience at the time they're probably thinking they're more in Simon's shoes. And let's laugh at the fish out of water guy from the future. But in some ways, it sort of flipped for me, not knowing the time and place there, is that I'm kind of out of the place also. And so like I had to figure out what hoovering was. I didn't know what it was either. So I figured it out before I saw the vacuum cleaner, but not much before that. Like it took me the first few times they said hoovering, I didn't know what they were saying, or what it meant.
Yeah. And in Only Fools and Horses, they put some Cockney rhyming slang down, and they'd say, "Run the old J. Edgar on." So for the Hoover, the J. Edgar Hoover. So it would be interesting. Wojtek should be able to join us next week, and maybe we could sort of get that same point of view about him watching something from another culture, with him watching it in Germany at the time. And he was about 10
I didn't
years
quite
old.
get like the picture just showed what I figured out what that sign said at the craft fair, but I still like some of the dialogue between the two girls and going in there like it just they talked too fast and I think they used some slang or they said some things that I didn't quite get what they were saying. I did get the gist of it that they were figuring out a way to embarrass her brother, but some of that kind of just slipped by me because it was too fast or just not quite recognizable what they were talking about.
Yeah, same here. I mean, that actress actually, well, it sort of went on to be more successful than Simon Nash and the one playing his sister. And then and then you've got in season 2, you've got
see that. Like that was actually felt that when I was watching her because I was like, okay, she comes off as inexperienced as far as being an actress, but she has a presence. You know what I mean? Like one of those people that right off the bat you can say this person has potential, even if she's not a great actress yet, she could be because she just has like that stage presence. She, very believable as the character, even if the dialogue is not quite natural yet.
Yeah. Also, generally, because I was thinking about this earlier today, there are not many very good female parts on television, especially comedic parts that don't know how to write funny female characters.
I think
so few.
I mean, we've talked about that before, but that's obviously was a complaint for a long time from both male and female people that was the case. Not just comedic. I mean, there's plenty of drama shows that had a hard time writing for females too, because we talked about that with Blake 7, where they was it Jenna? Was that her name?
Jenna Stan. Yeah. She should have been a great character.
Where they created, and this happens a lot with female characters. It's like they create a really good character, and then whether it's because there's different writers that come along or what, or if it's network pressure or whatever it is. But they basically, when situations come up where they need like generic female character in response to something, they turn into that instead of the character that they've been. And it's really frustrating because you don't see it happen as much with male characters. Usually they're more willing to have just sort of one-off male characters that fulfill stereotypes that they're not the main people. Now, for some reason, rather than have like a guest character that's a female to fill the role if they need that. It's like they go, oh, we've got a female, we'll just use her, even if it doesn't make any sense for that character to behave that way. And that's the most frustrating part of it, is because it's obvious that it's not that they can't create realistic female characters from the beginning. It's just that they sort of use this laziness where they'll use females as a plot device.
Yeah.
And so when they've created the better created the female character was to begin with, the worse that is when they do that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, why did you mess with this character that was well done and you had a solid character, and then you just said, oh, well, we in this episode we need for a female to do this, therefore we're going to use her, and it's dumb.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of times in, say, Doctor Who or Blade 7, you got a lot of writers, and I suspect that a lot of the writers are NT males, and they might not know that much about women.
Yeah, well, Doctor Who, I would say that, one of the most successful characters that they pretty much kept on track until the very end was Leela. I thought, when they created her, and maybe it was just because she was so extreme compared to some of the other characters, that she was sort of seen as she's this warrior character that they were able to write better for that, even if it was stereotypical, to not make her the damsel in distress type character. And so it wasn't until the very end of her time when they wrote her out badly that, but other than that, it was like they usually wrote pretty well for Leela.
I mean, the odd good ones, like they had the Katrina character, was it during the Daleks Master Plan? And I know you like that story. She's played by Jean Marsh, and Zoe, the assistant.
Actually, Jean Marsh was a different character. She was Sarah Kingdom.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Katarina was... going blank on the actress's name for that one. I think it might have been Adrian Hill, maybe. Yeah. Anyway, those were two very different characters, but both pretty well written in their short time on the show. But there are examples of characters that are more consistent. And some of the soap operas, we've talked about it before, is that the longer an actress or actor, plays the part, usually the more they can kind of put their own stamp on it or sort of solidify the character, is that even when they're writing producer changes, they know the character well enough and have enough experience that they can keep it from straying too far away from the established character.
That might be one of the few genres where you actually tend to get good female characters in soaps, because that's a lot of their audience, females.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get better female characters in soaps.
Yeah, like I said, they still have to fight for that some. I read an article about a particular female actress that was talking about how she stayed on the show for a really long time, and she said she would always read these things about actresses or actors just in general that would sort of fight with producers or writers about what their character was supposed to act like. Like, oh, I know my character better, they wouldn't do this and this. And she actually said, I almost never had to fight with that. For me, it was entirely about the wardrobe. They always wanted me to wear more revealing clothes, and my thing was that my character wouldn't wear that. So it wasn't as much about what she would say or do. She was like, they seemed to be able to write my character very well. I didn't argue with them about that. It was just when they'd be, oh, well, we want you to wear this low-cut outfit. And she's like, that's not what she would do. She's portrayed very much as this wholesome character that, is not looking to show off her body. It's not that she would never wear anything like that, but it would be like certain occasions if it just looked right, but she'd say the thing that they would always be like, and that she considered leaving, even did leave the show for a while mostly because of that. She's like, because they would keep on doing it over and over again. And after a while, you feel the pressure, it's like, oh, I'm being difficult if I don't agree to this. And so that's a thing that, and I'm not saying that's entirely unique to females, because I'm sure there have been some male lead actors, especially where there's been pressure from network or other people for
get your shirt off, like the Bobby Ewing type in Dallas.
And And in the other side of the coin, somebody like John Polito, we talked about on Homicide, who played Corsetti, where he basically let go from the show because they were like, well, for budget reasons, we had to get rid of somebody, so we got rid of the fat, ugly guy because, audiences want to see better looking people. So that was
his reactions, though, his reaction shots was some good comedy acting.
Yeah, and he was realistic as a cop. And that's the thing is, the whole point of that show was these were supposed to be like real cops. And the further they went along, I still think, even over the whole time of the show, it holds up against so many other cop shows. But the further it went along, the less realistic the cast looked. Because every time somebody would leave, they'd replace them with somebody they thought was more telegenic. So by the end of the show, you had characters that were chosen more for their looks rather. And not that they were bad actors. I don't think any of them were. It's just that they were less realistic as cops because that's not why they were picked.
Right.
Anyway, I veered far off of the Kappatoo.
Yeah, but that's okay because generally it's like, right then. So you made some good points. But that digression has made me forget them. A lot of it is, because quite a few of the things you mentioned are things that come along later on, and it does. I did like the fact that in this episode he was having problems with his wristband, rather than that wristband becoming just the easy solution to something like wave the magic wand, or
that one picture just went with the blue smoke coming out of the lawnmower.
That was unnecessary. The blue smoke,
Well, my first thought was I didn't know whether it was supposed to be the lawnmower does that normally, or whether he had done something like with his technology to try to rig it up. So I wasn't quite sure what was trying to show there. So
another bit that was pony was like him preparing to be hit in the shoulder. You could sort of tell by the way he was carrying himself that, like, he's going to bump shoulders.
Yeah, that was, I don't know if it's, I'm racist and I think all white people look alike or whatever, but I didn't get, like, at first, I thought that was supposed to be Simon again, and it took me a second to realize it was another dude. So I didn't get why he said, first in calling him Mr. Williams, I was like, wait a minute, that's not his name. And then it took me a minute. I was like, oh, yeah, that's like his buddy or whatever. So I'm not super impressed with that kid so far. He's kind of generic, but I guess that's all they've given him so far.
The sidekick friend. Yeah.
Like so far he is nothing but buddy character with absolutely no character to him whatsoever besides that.
Well, in season 2, you've got Sarah Alexander, who went on to have quite a big career, and it was like her first role.
Yeah, don't be talking about season 2 now.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
Because I don't know who that is. I don't need to know.
Okay, fair enough. And then we got Denise Van Outen there, and
she's not bad. But honestly, like I said, I after 2 episodes, I think the future chick definitely seems. And I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but that's because they have
Mufor.
Mufor, is that her name?
Yeah, I'll try and find her.
Maybe that's why I can't remember the name, because it's just kind of goofy sounding.
Yeah, there we go. There she is.
Yeah, but I like her better than and that may sort of been the intention, that they've portrayed that the other girl is she's the unattainable one, but kind of stuck up more, whereas this girl is supposed to be much more approachable. That's the impression that I get from them.
Well, what happened with Denise Van Outen's career is that she became very popular as a presenter with a very likable personality. And
I'm
actually,
not talking about the actress. I'm just talking about the characters as they were on this.
Yeah, she didn't do a lot of acting roles after that. And interestingly, at one point, apparently women were going into cosmetic surgeons and asking for Denise Van Outen's in terms of the breast size that they wanted. So she was she became quite popular to both males and females. Yeah.
Well, obviously, this show has not featured that, at least not yet.
No, that wasn't in evidence in this because she was only about 17 at the time. Right.
That is also unique. I mean, I figured out it was a lawnmower as soon as he like opened the thing, but I've never seen one that looked quite like that. So, and at first I didn't think it was like I went through several stages of that because he first looks at the motor. I think, oh, I think it's a lawnmower. Then I figure it's probably a push mower, and then he gets on it and rides away. So then I was like, well, is it actually supposed to be a riding mower, or did he just rig it? So so I had all these like things where I didn't quite know for sure.
I think she was well cast just for that expression on her face.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that because I couldn't tell what she was putting in the cart. So I actually thought it was funny as a delayed joke that they didn't really show that it was cat food until he's starting to put it in his cart. And then it's like, well, even though they'd shown the pet store van or whatever, the pet van next to it. So sort of like subtle clue.
But you notice the difference in Simon's sister here, because when they do season 2, they made it 2 years later, and so she's grown up a little bit more. And so
season 2 stuff, man.
Okay, fair enough.
Getting way ahead.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I mean, wish to do. Yeah, I like the setup. I thought she was okay as a police officer, but with a little part.
Yeah, there was nobody that jumped out to me as not fitting the part. The only knock I would say, well, the two things. One was just the choice of having the computer guy with the over the top initial presentation, and then the other thing was, like I said, his friend, Simon's friend, is just sort of generic. But that's not the fault of the actor. I don't think they just at that point anyway hadn't really given him any kind of anything to do, so he doesn't really have much to it.
Yeah, I sort of notice it with these writers. Like you get these writers on Doctor Who, and like he was a writer on Blake Seven. Basically, I suspect a lot of these writers are NTs because it's like they would send a storyline off to. Because you know what I mean? Because it's like Doctor Who stories with ideas.
No, I just laugh because it's like you're thinking that they're just going generic human one. They're incapable.
But what I'm sort of going towards is like the strength of the writers is towards ideas, right? And so they're not like NFs who are the best at characterization. I would think, because the NFs are like interested in like. And just the feeling preference in general. I
agree with that. I would say the NFs are probably best at certain kinds of characterization, not just in general.
Yeah, especially writing idealists are good at. Yeah.
Well, probably going to be best at framing their own types of reactions to things. Maybe that would be. The case.
It's just that I've seen a lot of Doctor Who stories where it's like. And it's as I've gotten older, where it's like when I'm younger, it's like the NTs are only interested in the ideas; they don't care about the characters.
Well, there's sometimes it works together well. Like the Star Trek: The Next Generation episode I watched last night was about where they come upon a place where there's one single Borg kid that survived, and they take him back to the ship. And anyway, I won't spoil the whole plot or for anybody that wants to see it or doesn't care. But anyway, the basic thing is they sort of wrestle with this thing about, the Borg are like this race that just destroys or assimilates anyone, kind of like the Cybermen in Doctor Who. It's like, but they're like this one dude is sort of finding his individuality, and then they can't like see him as this faceless enemy anymore. So I think that was an example of probably where the NT idea initiated the concept of what about if one of these members of the collective has more of this individual connection, and then they sort of flavored it with the more NF kind of like evaluation of that, like what it means to be an individual and those sort of things. So it's sort of it seemed like it was sort of a teamwork in that area, put it that way.
Yeah, what you can get is, I think with a lot of American writers is that, this never happened on Homicide, where you didn't really say, oh, this has definitely been written by a liberal. Right, but in a lot of shows, it's like the bias can come through. But so, for example, the way that Homicide handled race was brilliant, properly even-handed, no agenda there. But so what I'm sort of getting at is that you might have certain where it's just the culture, and it's like you have writers that might come across as NF-ish, but it's just their politics sort of like coming through.
Yeah, maybe. With the Star Trek episode I was talking about, I didn't get that impression at all. And like I said last week when I was talking about how Kappatoo sort of has its viewpoint on the future in this, and I said actually some NFs don't like Star Trek because they think their vision of the future is too militaristic, and their idea is that we should be away from that type of society by that time.
Oh yeah, because what you had was you had this weird combination where, well, not so much weird, but it was Gene Roddenberry's own, like, I imagine Gene Roddenberry was a bit of a liberal, but also he was in like World War II, and he had like this military stuff going on. So it was like his combination of sort of maybe military service and his own politics.
Yeah, that's why I said it seemed like with Star Trek, at least up to that point, I haven't seen more recent stuff as much, but at least up to that point with the original series and Next Generation, that it was NTs who came up with the ideas,
yeah,
but they would sometimes have writers that fleshed out some of the more F concepts around it, like the way the characters react to things. So that's why I think it works in a lot of cases, because it's not portrayed as this very monolithic NT viewpoint of the future that never factors in the feelings of anybody. It goes the other direction, but in a way where it feels like they're preaching about stuff most of the time. And also, again, like you said, with Homicide, they portray different perspectives, and those perspectives are realistic. It's not always portrayed as being everything is dried good guy versus bad guy. In fact, most of the time it's not. They explore those very things about how a lot of times it's not just as simple as this is an enemy we have to fight. It's portrayed as what are the things we have to consider, and that other race or whoever it is we're dealing with has their own point of view and all that, and we have to think about all those things.
Yeah, I think there's a difference in writing for, if we think of classic Doctor Who and Star Trek, and also I heard that the first season of Star Trek The Next Generation was a little bit weird, because like Gene Roddenberry was in charge, and people thought that some of the storylines were a little bit out of date or a little bit weird.
Well, I mean, they flat out tried to use some of the templates of the original series. I think sometimes more successfully than others, but they went away from that, I think, as the show went on and kind of went in different directions. But obviously, once he was no longer around, especially. But yeah, I still think the first season was good in many ways, but it was a little more uneven, put it that way.
So there may have been, just in the way that I get the I know what it was like with Doctor Who, in that what would happen is people would send in a story outline in Doctor Who, and then they were commissioned to write the script. And so I think, and because of the way the Doctor Who world operates, like the writer has got to come up with a lot of their own characters, apart from the Doctor and a companion. And whereas in Star Trek, you've got a lot of the regular cast, and you've got a series Bible, and there's probably more input working, as you said, the NT coming up with the ideas, and maybe there's other people coming in with their input. Whereas I think it's more on the writer on their own in Doctor. So what I'm sort of meaning is an NT writer might have their lack of characterization more exposed in Doctor Who, in that the NT writer doesn't really care that much about. I mean, Douglas Adams pretty much himself said in an interview, it's not about the characters, it's about the ideas. And he agreed.
Yeah, well, ideally, you'd have a mix of all of that. I mean, that's why I think it works best to have representation from different temperaments, because then you get a fuller picture of whatever it is, a better, more perspectives, and a fuller, idea of whatever it is you're focusing. It doesn't mean you can't start with sort of a, main perspective of one temperament, which is usually going to be that of the writer, if there's one writer, but it helps to have multiple perspectives. So even if you have a primary writer of something, if those ideas are bounced off of other people and they weigh in with their perspective and kind of add flavor to things, then I think you get a better written thing.
Yeah. So, for instance, on a similar series, you called Beast Wars, you had 2 writers in charge. One was Bob Forward, and I get the idea he was like an artisan writer, interested in action sequences and blowing stuff up, as Larry DiTillo said. And then Larry DiTillo, maybe an intuitive, and so you have that combination with those two. And Larry DiTillo worked on Babylon 5, so that was a good series, Jeff, Beast Wars. Maybe we get to watch that in future. Who knows? Right then, I don't know what else to say about this episode. I thought it tailed off a little bit towards the end, but I did like. I was amused by him riding the lawnmower. So,
well, can you next time your photo thing gets to the chalkboard, can you stop it there, because I never was able to read that whole thing.
Okay. Yes. So here we go.
You went too fast.
Right, here we
I saw
go.
something about Flink.
Yeah, Tracy Cotton, you're my favorite Flink, and I love you. Something Simon Cashmere.
Okay. So then I got to ask, was Flink actually like a slang word that you're aware of, or was that just made up by the show?
I think that was just made up by the writer, Ben Steed.
Okay. Well, because, obviously the ones that are like the future slang, we're supposed to not really know what, though. They're supposed to be like, made up for the show. But for the ones that are set, in the past, then I don't know for sure which ones are and which ones aren't.
I take stuff like lustro and lustrette and tranquillo. I even looked up tranquillo. I think that's used in certain other contexts. Tranquillo might actually be. I looked that one up. I think tranquillo is used. So sort of. Is that signed? That's it. Love you, signed Simon Cashmere. That's the only thing I can imagine what it is.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I have the same feelings about all the stuff with the computer doing the different voices. That is something that can get. I didn't like the line about Ronald Reagan. Like, I think history will show that he knew a lot about politics.
Yeah, that's just kind of weird, because nobody ever questioned him being good at politics. I mean, he won 2 landslide presidential elections, and before that was the governor. So it's like, whatever else you want to say about him, he was definitely knew quite a bit about politics. Yeah,
I think the problem is that he was on Spitting Image and he sort of played as a buffoon. And it's like it's just a little bit of bias, maybe, from the writers. I mean, they'd say the same thing about Biden if Biden was a GOPer rather than a Democrat. Well, in fact, if Biden was a GOPer, he would be president.
Well, yeah, obviously, but also I heard a thing just the other day, and I agreed with it. Not to get on to a long thing about this, but it said that most of the people that hate Trump would love him if he had run as a Democrat.
Yeah, I mean, there's not that much difference between
based on which party he picked, which he could have done either one because he's not an ideologue.
Oh yeah,
he just picked the one that he thought he had a better chance of winning, and he was right.
I mean, the biggest government in America before Biden, Trump. So
he never cared about shrinking government. He's definitely not a big. He's not big on any ideology, period. But he's definitely not like a big cut spending guy. He just anyway. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, that this was written obviously within the context of Reagan, just barely having not been the president anymore. But from a future perspective, you could see it as, over time, history gets distorted and people don't really remember the
that's
details
true.
of the thing. They just sort of have these kind of vague stereotypes of what people were. It's like Abraham Lincoln is the guy who freed the slaves, but they don't get into all of the details of everything that went into Abraham Lincoln's philosophy or politics or whatever. So presidents can often be viewed even, in very simple contexts of this one was good and this one was bad for whatever reason, when there's obviously a whole lot that goes into everything that happened in their particular terms in office. So something from hundreds of years in the future, a computer having some sort of thing that says, well, it's a funny joke to say something about Ronald Reagan not knowing much about politics, then, it could just sort of be that. So you can view it at this point differently than maybe it would have been viewed in 1990. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can get that sort of thing, sort of comedic license, as it were. Yeah, so the jokes.
I may have even put in as an example of the whole thing about he's got to play sort of the laugh track for himself, because so the whole idea might have been that it is a bad joke because that was the point, that it didn't really have.
Well, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm happy to reframe for him. Right. Right. So, I give this about 7 out of 10.
I'll give it a 7 too.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I'm just gonna stop.
So there we go. Join us next time for whatever the next one's called. Something about time, because they all are.
Yes, they've all got time in. What I think one has timing rather than time. That's the only variation.
Right. Join us next week for something about time.
Yes.